Chapter 81, The Fishmen Troops Knowledge and Arrangements. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Navy Headquarters, Marineland, Dormitory Area Number 3, downstairs of Building C. I saw nearly 200 Murlocs uniformly dressed in sailor uniforms, neatly arranged in a square formation. Each of them was nearly 2 meters tall, strong, and had very firm eyes. They looked straight ahead, towards Jinbe and Aladdin. At this time, these two men were already the official lieutenant colonels and majors of the headquarters, and were the commander and deputy commander of the Fishmen troops. Naturally, they also wore the code of justice representing their status as generals, not to mention, with the seriousness on their faces, they looked really impressive. However, they are waiting for someone. Soon, a colonel came over alone, looked at Jinbe with a smile and said, "I believe you have received the notification from the marshal yesterday. Today, I, Harrington, will take you around to familiarize yourself with the island's environment, as well as the training content you need to carry out in the future and the general tasks you need to perform." "Yes, please give me some advice," Jinbe responded loudly and without a smile. They were originally from the Navy King's army, so they were not uncomfortable with this at all. This also made Colonel Harrington very satisfied with his attitude. Although he has a gentle smile on his face now, he actually cares about the rules of superiority and inferiority. Before I came here, I thought that if these fishmen became arrogant and domineering with their so-called 10 times power, I might have to take action to scare them, but now it seems that there is no need at all. These fishmen are quite good. Okay, then follow me. Colonel Harrington walked casually outside with his hands behind his back, followed closely by Jinbe and Aladdin, and then nearly 200 fishmen sailors lined up and walked out of the gate of dormitory number 3. It immediately attracted the attention of the passing navy of all levels, but some people who saw it yesterday just glanced at it. After all, there is no beautiful woman in it. What's so good about a fish? As for the navy that they saw for the first time, if they were in a hurry, they could only walk and look at it a few times. Only those who were idle for the time being would stop and watch. There are so many Murlocs wearing marine uniforms. It is really a rare thing and quite spectacular. Where have you seen so many Murlocs gathered together before? Go forward about 300 meters along this road, then turn left, and you will see the cafeteria. Then go to the right from the cafeteria door and you will find the headquarters hospital. Colonel Harrington, who is 34 years old this year, introduced the two people behind him as he walked, completely ignoring the stares of the surrounding navy. "You haven't eaten yet. I'll take you to have breakfast first. There is no time limit in the cafeteria. You can go whenever you want. There are chefs at any time. You can eat as much as you want. There is no charge. But you can't leave too much. You will be punished. Is there any special treatment for us fishmen, such as setting aside a special area for us?" Jinbe hesitated for a moment, then asked. "Special treatment?" Colonel Harrington glanced at him strangely and asked, "Are you Murloc special? Why do you have to clear an area in the cafeteria just for you?" "Ah, this." Jinbe opened his mouth and didn't know how to answer. Colonel Harrington smiled and said, "Relax, there aren't that many troubles in Marineland, and the demi-humans in our navy are. Not only the fishmen, but also the giants can enter and leave the cafeteria at will. If one day you encounter someone who is racially discriminating against you, just yell back. If the other party takes action, don't hesitate to beat him up first. When the time comes, the military police will come to deal with it. Who is right and who is wrong will be found out." Hearing this, Aladdin asked, "What if the military police go to the side? Look at the phone bugs around. Moreover, it's not just the military police department here. They can't cover the sky with one hand. On the contrary, if the military police are found to have problems, they will be taken directly to the Judiciary Island for trial. The consequences will be much more serious than if you fight." Colonel Harrington shook his head and smiled. "By the way, let me tell you the general situation of your fishmen unit. To put it simply, in normal times, it is not difficult for your Murloc sailors to participate in daily training with human sailors, which is 200 laps of a 500-meter standard track and 2,000 standard push-ups. If they do not do it to the standard, the school officer around me will ask to do 2 more, and climb a 100 meters high rope back and forth for 100 times. Finally, there is actual combat training, whether with bare hands or with a wooden sword. Just hit the opponent until he faints completely. The winner will be you can rest, the loser will be woken up, and then fight again. Regardless of victory or defeat, the training is over. After finishing speaking, Colonel Harrington said happily, "Of course, if you fishmen feel that this is not enough, as long as there is no mission, you can practice more on your own. No one will stop you." "Is this daily training?" Major Aladdin exclaimed, and the dozens of fishmen sailors behind them who were closer to them also had their eyes widened, feeling something bad in their hearts. When they were in the Navy King's army, their training intensity was much lower than this. Colonel Harrington nodded with his hands behind his back. "Yes, daily training, unless you encounter some special circumstances, this is untouchable content. Unless you are promoted to a school officer, then it will be optional. Daily training usually ends before 9 o'clock in the morning. If there are no tasks after that, it is considered free time, and the tasks of your Murloc troops are not complicated. If the dispatched warship needs the support of Murloc soldiers, then you need to send a small team on board. The team, or a certain battle plan above, requires your fishman's cooperation. I feel that once most of the generals and commanders have experienced the benefits of fishman soldiers, you will be busy. Someday, the G branch outside may even apply to send fishman soldiers there." Before arriving, the colonel had already learned about the powerful abilities of the fishmen in the sea. They can swim fast, have great strength, can breathe, and can communicate with fish. This is simply the best helper for the Navy. "Let's just talk about me. I will be on a mission in a few days, and I will definitely lead a group of fishmen soldiers. Then you two will have to pick good ones to come over." After hearing such a long paragraph, Jinbei felt relaxed and happy. A smile finally appeared on his face and he said, "Don't worry, we will definitely send the elite there." At the same time, everyone came to the headquarters cafeteria. The fishmen, including Jinbei and Aladdin, were immediately shocked by the hugeness, breadth and bustle of the place. Because it was during breakfast time, the flow of people in the cafeteria was at its peak, with dense numbers of naval forces of all levels coming in and out, and the fragrance of gourmet food filled the air everywhere. The most shocking thing is that some lieutenant generals from the giant tribe can be seen walking out very naturally, patting their slightly bulging bellies and shaking them. You can see how big this cafeteria is. Inside it, you can see round tables of different sizes, and even an extra-large round table more than 10 meters wide. The table is filled with mountains of various foods. A strong waiter walked back and forth carrying a plate several meters wide. Their steps were extremely agile. When there were many people blocking the road, some would even fly up on moon steps and walk over people's heads. Past, but the surrounding Navy didn't care at all. "Is this the Navy headquarters?" Jinbei murmured to himself. Although it was just a cafeteria, he could fully appreciate how powerful its power was with just a little knowledge. "Colonel Harrington, I want to learn human swordsmanship, is it possible?" Aladdin, who had come back to his senses, seized the opportunity and asked. "Swordsmanship, there is also daily training, that is, actual combat training. As long as you hold a wooden sword, there will be a general who specializes in swordsmanship to give you guidance. But you are already a major, so you don't need to participate in the training," Colonel Harrington said. He said while thinking about what to eat later. "Can't you participate?" "It's okay, as long as you don't feel ashamed to train with a group of sailors. In fact, I suggest you find a swordsman general to get to know him. It would be better if he takes time to teach you alone." "Do you know anyone?" Aladdin said helplessly. "I only know Lieutenant General Ching Pheasant." Chapter 82, Dorag's New Official Fire. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Shampoo Islands, Area GR66, this is the base where the Navy branch is stationed on the island. The area next to it, GR62, is allocated to the Fishman Island Sea King Army. Basically, the entire Area 60 belongs to government departments and the general public is prohibited from entering and exiting freely, just as Jean Bey, Aladdin and others were getting familiar with the environment of Marineford. Drago, who had just been promoted to lieutenant general and appointed as the base commander, also spent the morning getting to know the facilities and personnel in the base. By the way the invisible wind turned around the island, it has to be said that in terms of covert investigation and infiltration capabilities, the hurricane fruit is probably the most useful among all the natural types. At this time, he and the invited Right Minister of Fishman Island were discussing the upcoming battle plan in the conference room. Originally, the Sea King Army had no obligation to cooperate with the Navy, but this time the mission involved rescuing the fishmen and mermaids, so Dorag invited him in. The latter had no objections, but was slightly excited after hearing the contents of the mission. Originally, I was supposed to apply to the headquarters for the support of the fishmen troops, but Lieutenant Colonel Jean Bey and his friends have just arrived in Marineland and need to get familiar with the life there. Drago looked at the Right Minister and expressed his apology. Dressed in orange skin, wearing armor, and carrying a long sword across his waist, the Right Minister of the seahorse species replied seriously, "No, we should be the ones thanking the Navy for allowing the Sea King Army to participate in this liberation operation. If you have any orders, please just give them. In that case, I won't be polite." Dorag nodded, stopped talking nonsense, went straight to the topic, looked at the map of Shampoo Islands on the conference table, and said, "I hope that the Navy King's army can sneak into the sea and cooperate with the warships to blockade the entire island, focusing on the number 20 area in the lawless zone and the number 50 area in the shipyard. Everyone's task is that once a pirate ship or slave ship tries to escape out to sea, please directly drill through the bottom of the ship and drag it down. If someone falls into the water, give priority to rescuing the slave and then hand it over to the Navy. If it is a fishman or mermaid clan, you can take it directly back to the Sea King Army station, we will not interfere." After hearing this, the Right Minister felt that there was nothing wrong with what Dorag said, so he readily agreed and said, "Okay, leave it to us, I will make arrangements right away." After saying that, he turned around and left the meeting room neatly. This made Dorag, who was working with fishmen for the first time, begin to appreciate them a little, and at the same time he was more optimistic about the world government's decision to allow fishmen to enter the Navy. The arrest of the slave king has been announced. Those in the slave industry on the island should also be wary of my arrival, but no one would think of launching a clearing operation directly on the first day of taking office, right? Dorag turned his attention from the Right Minister and back to the map of the Shampoo Islands. The smile on his face disappeared and became expressionless. Although this operation also included the shipbuilding and coating industries on the island, the main target was the lawless zone from Area 1 to Area 29. These three areas are connected together and are filled with criminal gangs specializing in kidnapping and extortion. Areas 20 to 29 have the largest concentration of slave companies, slave shops and slave auction houses. It is not difficult to imagine that these slave industries, which have been rooted on the island for at least 100 years, must have a large number of armed personnel responsible for guarding, and there will be many masters among them, but to Dorag, these are nothing. In his opinion, long-term pain is worse than short-term pain. Instead of slowly arguing with him, it is better to get rid of it all in one day. Chaos is bound to occur in this process, but how can we remove such a cancer without resorting to heavy lifting? He felt that this was the reason why Marshal Kong sent him here to be the base commander. His strength and identity were enough to bear all the turmoil and revenge, not an ordinary lieutenant general. However, a piece of information given to him by Marshal Kong made Dorag cautious and even vigilant. He glanced at area number 50 on the map. Rayleigh, the former Pluto of the Roger pirates. To be honest, Dorag didn't want to provoke such a strong enemy at this time, but with his character, it was impossible for him to give up regulating the coating industry because of Rayleigh. As long as the demand for coating on pirate ships is eliminated, they will not be able to go to Fishman Island, let alone the second half of the Grand Line. Most pirates will no longer have the opportunity to come into contact with armed hockey and knowledge hockey, although some pirates are able to comprehend and master hockey on their own, either by chance or by extraordinary talent. They are not the majority anyway, if things continue like this, there will be fewer and fewer pirates in the waters of the New World. Without the supply of fresh blood, the power of each pirate group will be contained, and it can be regarded as a complete arena-like arena. Cage. However, Dolag also knows that this cage is not strong now, because the strength of the four of them is not enough to seal the strength of those big pirates, but everything has a beginning, just take your time. Soon, while the people on the Shampoo Islands were still living peacefully, and the managers of the Dark World were discussing the impact of Dorag's arrival and how they should deal with it, warships sailed out one after another. Naval base port, they did not immediately encircle both sides of the island. Instead, they drove forward for a mile and then turned back to form a larger encirclement. The soldiers of the Sea King army are much simpler. They can just jump into the sea and spread out. According to Dorag's instructions, most of their troops are concentrated on the seabed in Area 20 and Area 50. In other areas, two people just one set of monitors. In this way, if you look down and see through, you will find that with the Chambord Islands as the center, the Navy King's army and the Navy warships have formed two encirclements, one small and one large, one bright and one dark, and the outer encirclement is shrinking rapidly. Boom. At the same time, the base door of the naval branch suddenly opened. 3 generals wearing justice coats walked out first, leading a large number of sailors behind them holding muskets and long knives, and quickly rushed in 3 directions. Colonel Eric led the team to Area 70, where Hotel Street is located, and they were going to enter Area 20 through there. Lieutenant Colonel Cecil led the team into Area 0, the lawless zone, from GR1 to GR9. They were responsible for arresting all pirates and kidnapping gangs they encountered, so they had the largest number of soldiers. Interestingly, the previous black cat, 3-legged cat and white cat, fishing kitten are also among them. Their clothes are no different from the sailors around them. They are all sailor uniforms with a seagull hat. The last team was personally in charge of Major General Irvine. They directly crossed the bridge connecting the 2 areas and prepared to conduct a thorough investigation of the entire number 50 area. Any pirate ship found to be coding would be detained. However, in Lieutenant General Dorag's order, he specifically reminded that there was no need to arrest the coding craftsmen involved, only a verbal warning was enough. Major General AI-1 was actually very confused about this order, but the strangest thing about him was why he was not sent to Area 20, where the slave auction house was located, but to Area 50, which was a non-key target. He must be much stronger than Colonel Eric. But Major General Iwan didn't know that Dolag was interested in his stable character. To avoid causing unnecessary trouble, he can just go to Area 20 in person. Chapter 83 Pluto Rayleigh's Big Question Mark. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Bubbles slowly emerged from the ground. The moment they were completely detached, they floated into the air driven by the air. They passed through the lively crowd, and then slowly flew over the ship's mast. When the top of the Yarkman mangrove tree reaches the top, it will release high temperature and explode in an instant. This is Area GR53. Shipyards and coating houses extend along the seashore on both sides. The sails are furled one by one. The ships, large and small, are like injured whales, letting the humans around them drift. They were knocked and touched here and there. In comparison, the coating laboratory is much quieter than the shipbuilding laboratory. A famous master led his young apprentice, carrying a bucket filled with mangrove mucus, to carefully perform coating work on the ship he was responsible for, while explaining the techniques and experience from time to time. However, in recent times, an anomaly has appeared among them, and this anomaly has become an interesting topic among coating craftsmen. Some apprentices who were closer to the alien looked at him from the corner of their eyes from time to time. The gray-haired Faulkner is an old coder who has been working for nearly 40 years. He skillfully shakes up the slime in the bucket, then use air to expand it into a bubble, and then carefully integrate the newly formed small bubble into the big bubble on the ship. This so-called coating is actually just like this, putting small bubbles together little by little to create a big bubble that can cover the entire ship. So theoretically speaking, the bigger the ship, the longer it will take. And even though the process is not complicated, there are quite a lot of steps involved. Let's talk about the first step. If you want to turn the mucus into bubbles, you need to practice for a year or 2 as an apprentice. After that, you have to maintain the bubbles and not let them explode easily, which tests your hand skills even more. Don't pay attention to their eyes, study hard, and when you learn it, you will have a skill to support yourself. Such earnest words were naturally addressed to the apprentice standing behind him, but this apprentice looked much older than the other apprentices around him. This is a man nearly 1.9 meters tall, with a broad chest and strong muscles. He has gorgeous blonde hair and wears glasses. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes are obvious, and he looks 40 or 50 years old. Don't worry, old man, I don't care about this. Rayleigh, whose pseudonym is Rayleigh, said with a cheerful smile, while carefully observing the old master's movements. That's good, that's good. Faulkner nodded happily. But just when he was about to continue explaining to him, there was a sudden noise in the distance, which attracted the attention of everyone around him. Go away. Go away. Get out of the way for me. I saw a middle-aged man wearing a black captain's hat and a black coat running over in a hurry with a group of sailors armed with various dangerous weapons. When he encountered a passerby who was in the way, he kicked him away, but he did not pursue him any further, but continued to approach quickly. Hey, isn't that Captain Gowers? Rayleigh raised a brow. I remember that we agreed to deliver the ship in a week, right? That's right. We will collect half of the deposit first. When we deliver the ship, they will give us the rest. Master Faulkner nodded. Just as they were talking, Gowers and his group had already arrived. Captain Gowers did not even glance at the two of them, but jumped onto the bow of the ship. At this time, the bubble wrap had just covered 3 sides of the ship. One part. Quick. Move quickly and go to sea immediately. Seeing this, Master Faulkner didn't say anything, let alone come forward to negotiate. He had been working here for so many years and had never encountered any situation. This group of pirates was obviously being chased by someone, and they couldn't communicate with them at all. As for the idea of asking for follow-up fees, they had no intention of asking for follow-up fees. After all, he hadn't finished plating the bubble film, so getting half of the deposit was already a huge profit. If you have finished coating yourself and the pirates choose to leave without paying, then you need to notify the relevant personnel to deal with it. The coating industry is not left unattended, but no matter what, it was not his turn as a coating craftsman. Rayleigh on the side didn't react at all. He just watched quietly as they put down the sail and hurriedly drove out of the dock. He was more curious about the situation on the other side and wanted to know what happened. Therefore, at this time, not only their ship was on the run, but more than a dozen pirate ships that were being coated were rushing over, making the area fall into chaos and noise. Check. Lower all the sails. As long as the skull and crossbones flag is hoisted, all sails will be detained. Rear Admiral Irvine ordered loudly to the navy behind him. Yes. Groups of sailors spread out like ants, completely ignoring the obstruction of some shipwrights or coders, and boarded the ship for inspection. On Rayleigh's side, because the ship had already sailed out, the sailors just glared at them and asked them to stay where they were for the time being and not to move. For a time, the entire number 50 area became agitated with the arrival of the navy, and the atmosphere became extremely tense. From time to time, there would be gunfire and shouts of death. This was obviously some pirates who had not had time to go to sea and were attacked by the navy. Was arrested and was trying to resist the law with force. Master, do the navy come often? Rayleigh leaned into Master Faulkner's ear and asked in a low voice. He felt that if this kind of thing really happened often, then he would have to consider changing to a pension career. He didn't want to face the navy's investigation all the time. No, old man, this is the first time I have encountered this kind of thing in the past few decades. It's really strange. The latter looked puzzled. The Navy has its own coders and doesn't need to come here. As for catching pirates, as long as the pirates don't make any noise on this island, they won't care too much. Hearing this, Rayleigh suddenly suspected that these Marines might be coming for him. Otherwise, why would something that hadn't happened for decades happen to him just over a year ago? That's not right. How would the Navy know I'm here? And if they are really here to arrest me, what's the use of sending just one major general? Rayleigh looked at Major General Ivan, who was dealing with a group of resisting pirates in the distance, and his heart was filled with big questions. What's going on? At the same time, as soon as the Faulkner pirates' ship sailed less than 300 meters away from the dock, a loud banging sound came from the bottom of the ship, which gave Captain Faulkner a bad premonition. Ship, Captain, no good, Captain. What happened? The pirate who came to report shouted with horror on his face. The bottom of the boat was pierced by something that looked like a harpoon, and not just one or two. Now it has become a hornet's nest, and the sea water is pouring in. Ha! A few dozen meters below their feet, under the sea, a fishman soldier of the Sea King army wearing armor and holding a steel fork was looking at the dozens of holes in the bottom of the boat with a wicked smile on his face. This was the order they received. They would never run up to confront these pirates head-on, because the bounty for pirates who can reach the Chambord Islands is basically not much lower. These Sea King troops may not be able to defeat them. If they encounter a tough opponent with a bounty of more than 50 million, they may all be wiped out. So find a way to pull them into the sea. If it is a person with abilities, they will definitely be unable to resist because they cannot swim. If they are not a person with abilities, even if the opponent can swim, they will not be their opponent in the sea. The fighting power of fishmen in water is several times that on land, especially in terms of speed, and they can still breathe normally. Chapter 84. No one can keep Dolag. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. 2 roasts, 4 servings of seafood pasta, extra spicy. Is Sandra the Great Lizard still feeling well? Everyone knows that restaurants are the busiest during meal time. The waiters in front of them post orders on the wall while loudly urging the dishes in front of them. The chefs in the back kitchen responded while speeding up the movements of their hands. Although the fan whirred overhead, it could hardly suppress the flames and high temperature rising from the stove. In such a noisy, and lively environment, if there is anyone who is relatively quiet, it may be the person who is silently washing dishes in the corner. This is a young man with a young face, but 3-dimensional facial features, and is quite handsome. He has medium-length curly hair parted in the middle, and his hair color is greenish and gray, like the mustard necessary for eating sashimi. I don't know if it was because the temperature in the kitchen was too high, or because he had been standing here washing dishes non-stop for almost 5 hours, with drops of sweat dripping from his forehead, but his movements were not slow at all, and he could quickly rinse the various bowls and cups piled up every time, and then insert them one by one into the distribution plate. At this time, the door-type dishwasher next to it was working. When the sound of water flow inside it stopped, the young man opened the door and a burst of steam suddenly hit his face, but he has long been accustomed to this. He pulled out the warm distribution tray filled with washed dishes. At the same time, he picked up the other distribution tray he had just prepared, pushed it into the dishwasher, and closed the door. And immediately the dishwasher starts running again. The next moment, the young man began to pile the steaming bowls and plates in front of him into categories on the small table aside, allowing the chef apprentices to take away the results of his work at will. He does this almost every day, and does it until 10 o'clock at night. Originally, the two of them were supposed to divide the morning and afternoon, but in order to earn more money, the young man took over the whole day's work after getting familiar with it. There is no other way. Apart from that, he basically doesn't do anything else except gambling, but it was gambling that made him learn a hard lesson last year, and he was almost captured by human traffickers and made a slave. But it was also because of this that he met a girl who was willing to make every effort for her. Wait. I will definitely buy you out. This sentence has been repeated in his mind countless times, but every time it gives him the strong inner strength to persevere when he is tired. Just then, a faint sound of gunfire came from outside. In response, everyone in the kitchen did not make a fuss and continued to do what they were doing. After all, this is the GR24 area, a law-free zone, but gradually some people noticed something was wrong, because the gunfire was too dense and too long. It didn't sound like a fight between a few people, but more like a large-scale gun battle. Boom. Suddenly, a tall and thick guy holding a long knife broke open the wooden door of the restaurant and walked in. He panted and shouted to the people at the table on the left. The Navy is coming for us. Let's go. What? Why did the Navy come here? More than a dozen people at the table stood up one after another, and some people asked in surprise, "This is a lawless zone. Are you mistaken? You didn't chase pirates here, right?" These people are all thugs under the slave trading company, and occasionally do part-time kidnapping jobs to earn some extra money. That's right. The Navy is visiting all the slave shops, slave companies, and slave markets. I heard that the slave auction house in Area GR1 was also attacked by them. The man who ran in saw that his colleagues did not believe him, and his already frightened face became a little more anxious. Finally, when he heard the gunshots getting closer and closer, he gritted his teeth and turned around and left, leaving only one sentence lingering in the restaurant. "Believe it or not, I warned you, don't regret it if you get caught." At this moment, the dozen or so people looked at each other in confusion, and the next moment, they rushed out of the restaurant like frightened wild boars. This scene left the other diners speechless. As for meal payment, since we operate in a lawless area, we collect money first and then serve the meal. Naturally, no waiter will come to stop us and ask for money. In fact, even if no money is given, no one dares to do this. But what everyone didn't know was that the man's voice was shouting very loudly, and it had already reached the inexplicably quiet back kitchen. Snapped. Suddenly, there was a sound of a porcelain plate falling to the ground and breaking, and then a gray-green figure rushed out, completely ignoring the chef's scolding, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Stella, Stella, don't let anything happen to you, Stella." Tetsolo, who was just 17 years old this year, ran wildly towards a slave shop in the GR28 district, accompanied by intensive gunfire. Area GR27, Area GR28, Area GR29. These three connected areas are where the slave industry is most concentrated on the Chambord Islands. Although there is the most famous slave auction house in the GR1 area, it is a top-end auction house and only accepts the best quality slaves, so the number of slaves is the smallest. On the contrary, these three places are filled with slave-related companies, shops, and even places dedicated to holding slaves in batches, called markets. In this way, these three places also have the largest number of armed personnel. When the naval force led by Colonel Eric approached this area, it was no surprise that they encountered the most violent resistance and obstruction. The thugs raised by these slave companies paid no attention to the Navy. As soon as they received the order to attack from above, they did not hesitate to pull the trigger. They don't want themselves or their family members to be imprisoned. Fierce gunshots, shrill screams, explosion flames, and thick smoke rising into the sky suddenly turned into a whirlpool of fear and death, shrouding the entire sky above District 20. No, not only Area 20, but also Area 0 and Area 10. The entire lawless zone is undergoing large-scale sweeps by the Navy. This is a small war. On the seaside of GR24 area, 5 ships with ordinary white sails were docked at the pier. Only a man and woman in suits and leather shoes were seen. Under the protection of the surrounding armed personnel, they quickly stepped on the wooden planks and ran onto the ship. Everyone's expressions were all with more or less panic and tension and anger. Damn! Damn Dorag! Damn the Navy! Dolag stood on the deck and gritted his teeth as he watched the island curse continuously. Where do these bastards get the courage to dare to do this? These are the properties of the royal families and nobles of various countries. A lady in a luxurious blue dress looked at him worriedly and said, "This should be the intention of the world government, otherwise the Navy would not be able to do this." "How can this be?" Dolag shouted in disbelief. "Even those Dracos come here from time to select goods. How could they allow the world government to do this?" No, it must be that Dorag who makes his own decisions and does whatever he wants because he is Garp's son. Yes, it must be like this, it must be like this. He seemed to have found the truth, with a sneer on his face and said, "Just watch, when the people above react, these Navy will definitely be dealt with, and we will return to business as usual. But this bastard Dorag is doomed. He must be doomed. He has no idea how terrifying the power and energy behind the slave industry is. No one can save him, not even Garp." Chapter 85, Lovers Finally Get Married. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Jessal tightly held the musket in his hand. using a house as a cover to block the bullets flying outside. From time to time, he turned sideways and fired a shot at the Navy at the other end, but more bullets would soon force him to his death. "Go back," he was panting heavily, ignoring the cold sweat on his back, and glanced around the situation. He was more or less relieved when he found that there were still many of his own men left. Fortunately, although there are no ordinary people living in this area, there are a large number of slave cells. In such intensive street fighting, even the Navy cannot easily break in. Harlan! Harlan! At this time, Jessal saw a familiar figure and shouted loudly to him. Otherwise, the voice would not be heard at all. "What's wrong?" The guy named Harlan hid behind a cargo box, pulled a grenade off his waist, pulled out the fuse on it and threw it out with all his strength. The next second, there was an explosion. It was not known whether the explosion hit anyone, but it would definitely prevent the Navy from continuing to approach. "Does the people above have any news? When will our reinforcements come, or when will we withdraw?" Jessal asked loudly while exchanging fire with the Navy. Harlan shouted back, No reply at all. "It seems that we have been abandoned and we have to find a way to leave." Jessal didn't have any anger about this result. He had been a thug for half his life and had encountered this kind of thing many times, so he was not angry at the first moment, but thinking about how to get out. "That's right, the key," he suddenly turned his head and looked at the trembling slaves in the cell. His face suddenly showed a hint of joy, and then he shouted to Harun again. "Notify everyone immediately. Those with keys should open the slave cell doors. Those without keys, smash them or shoot them. Release all these slaves and let them run towards the Navy." Harlan heard Jessal's proposal, thought for 2 seconds, and immediately understood what the latter wanted to do, which was to prepare the slaves to be their scapegoats, shields, and suicide bombs. The Navy came here obviously to rescue these slaves, so they would definitely not take action against them. In addition, there were so many of them that releasing them all would definitely cause chaos and obstruction. Each of these slaves wears explosive collars around their necks. As long as they run away for a certain distance without authorization, they will automatically explode. The power is comparable to 2 cannonballs tied together. Taking advantage of this opportunity, these abandoned thugs will have time to retreat. This approach was a bit too cold-blooded. However, Harlan only struggled for a few seconds, and his desire for survival still took over. He gritted his teeth and took out the phone bug in his pocket, and conveyed Jessal's meaning. "Good idea. Well done, hell. When we get out, I will treat you two to a drink." The news spread to most of the thugs first through phone bugs and then by word of mouth. They all showed excitement and looked at the slaves in the cells with playful eyes. "You definitely won't be able to sell it, but you can squeeze some value out of it for me, you losers." Soon, the locked cell doors one after another were opened in various ways. Some of the slaves inside ran out without saying a word, but some refused to move and kept shrinking back. They are not stupid. If they don't have collars around their necks, they may still be willing to fight to the death. But with collars, they might as well wait for the Navy to come over and wait for rescue. Why go out and cause trouble? It's just that when life and death are at stake, the thugs won't discuss it carefully. "If you don't get out, I will kill you all. Either die now or go out and die, you choose one." After saying that, he immediately shot a male slave through the forehead. The woman's screams exploded, and more people ran out of fear. Some people who still had sense left the cell under the guidance of the crowd, even if they were unwilling. At this moment, a large number of panicked men, women, and children poured out on the streets of GR27, GR28, and GR29 districts. They all wore dark iron collars around their necks. "Colonel Eric, what should we do?" A captain looked at the chaotic scene in stunned silence, but Colonel Eric didn't know how to deal with it, and it looked like these slaves didn't seem to be able to listen to advice. Could it be that if you tell them not to move, they won't stop? Whirring, just when the fighting Navy were overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of a large number of slaves and slowly stopped their attack, the sky above among the archy mangroves, waves of light green cyclones suddenly appeared, and the sound of the wind became louder and stronger. The small whirlwind at the beginning gradually evolved into the size of a hurricane. When these green winds swept across, it was like a tsunami rushing in all directions, drowning all the running slaves and thugs preparing to escape. In this sea of wind, even the navy could only try to stabilize their bodies, but they could not keep the hats on their heads. They were flying like white seagulls one by one. Colonel Eric put one hand in front of him to resist the strong wind, and with the other hand he grabbed a sailor who was about to be blown out if he didn't stand still. His lower body and legs were pinned to the ground, and he laughed excitedly. This ability is that of Lieutenant General Dorag. In his sight, slaves were restrained in place by the wind. They could neither fall nor move. They were surrounded by fast-moving green air. The thugs were blown into the air by the whirlwind, screaming madly. Spinning around, he rolled his eyes and fainted after a while. The next moment, Monkey D. Dolag, wearing a coat of justice, appeared from the wind with an expressionless face, looking down at the entire slave market. He originally didn't want to take action. After all, this was a rare military feast for his subordinates. As a chief officer, it was best not to intervene indiscriminately and steal their opportunity unless necessary, but now it's no longer possible. If he doesn't take action, so many slaves will suffer heavy casualties. This is not what he wants to see. Detain all those who resist. Find the keys and unlock the collars of all the trapped people, and then divide them into men and women to guard them. Don't let them move around at will for the time being. Wait for government personnel to come and arrange everything. As Dorag issued orders one by one, the wind between heaven and earth weakened rapidly. Although the wind still made people's clothes whistle, it no longer affected the actions of the navy and slaves. Of course, the slaves whose hair was messy due to the strong wind also regained their composure and felt the cold feeling on their necks. No one dared to move again. The thugs were frothing at the mouth and fell to the ground with white eyes. Some of the thugs were still dizzy and had no ability to fight anymore. They were handcuffed easily by the sailors. Stella. Just when the gunshots dissipated in the wind, all the commotion calmed down in the strong wind, and the navy began to disperse in an orderly manner. A startling shout resounded from the earth. Everyone subconsciously looked towards the source of the sound and found that it was a young man of 16 or 17 years old, running towards a blonde female slave. Tesolo, that the female slave looked excitedly at the young man running over, her arms already opened, but when she wanted to go up to him, the flowing wind around her did not allow her to do so. Wow, she's so beautiful. Why is such a beautiful woman here? Shouldn't she be transferred to the auction house? Some people were immediately amazed when they saw Stella's appearance. Although she only wore a thin blue sleeveless vest on her upper body, her perfect figure and charming face were not affected at all. In the air, Dolag had a smile on his face when he saw such a beautiful scene. Immediately before Tetsolo hugged Stella, he removed the wind force around the ladder, which could be regarded as supporting the happy reunion of the lovers. The next moment, the two kissed in a dissipating whirlwind. Chapter 86. Two more fates changed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Area GR27. Name: Stella. Age: 19. Tetsolo stood aside and watched Stella being questioned by a government employee. He was surprised when he heard the latter's age. He thought they were of the same age. It's interesting to say that although the two have known each other for a year, he has been busy making money most of the time and has never really understood this. At this time, not only them, but also the people who had been captured as slaves had taken off their explosive collars and were lining up in long lines to receive investigation and arrangements. Gender. Stella looked at the government personnel in suits and ties in front of her with doubtful eyes. Tetsolo beside her couldn't help but complain, "She is so beautiful, can't you tell? Just because she looks like a woman, it doesn't mean she is a woman. Who knows if she is from the Kamabaka kingdom?" The government employee showed some impatience in his eyes, tapped the notebook in his hand with the end of his pen, and said, "I need to record it, so just answer whatever you ask." Stella nodded and replied softly, "Okay, the gender is female." "From which sea, which kingdom, which island?" "South China Sea, Strawberry Island, do not belong to any kingdom." When the government personnel heard this, they took notes and nodded secretly, thinking, sure enough, most of the slaves are free people who are not managed by the kingdom. After all, basically no one will care about arresting them. Do you want to stay here, or do you want to go back to your hometown? This. Stella hesitated and looked at Tetzolo. The latter showed a hearty smile, held the former's right hand and said, if you want to go back, I can accompany you. But as soon as he said these words, he saw a government official in front of him reminding him, according to regulations, the Navy only sends enslaved people, and you can't go with them. Then I'll just take the boat and follow. Tetzolo didn't take it seriously. The money he earned this year was enough to buy a small boat. At this time, a naval captain who was maintaining order nearby came over and said with a smile, let's not say whether you are allowed to follow the warship. Ordinary ships, but if we can't keep up with the warships, and coupled with the extreme weather on the grand route, we will probably follow him without saying a word, and be careful not to drown him in the sea. Many people had witnessed the previous scene of Tetzolo and Stella's passionate kiss, so the two had now become a major focus in this area, and naturally received more attention from the surrounding navy. Tetzolo's expression changed, and he opened his mouth not knowing what to say. He really didn't want to be separated from Stella again, but he also didn't want to prevent the latter from returning to his hometown, which made him extremely entangled. I choose to stay here. Stella held Tetzolo's hand and looked at the latter tenderly as he made his decision. The two looked at each other and smiled. I believe you will be able to send me back in person, right? Tetzolo's Adam's apple twitched, he nodded hard, and made a promise with firm eyes, I will definitely earn enough money to buy a large, stable ship to take you back to the South China Sea. But just as the handsome man and beauty looked at each other affectionately, the Navy captain felt a little sour and a little nervous, and snorted coldly. It's not enough to have money or a boat. What if you encounter pirates on the road? Do you have the ability to protect her and yourself? Let me tell you, you should let this lady go back with our warship, otherwise you may not be able to go back in this life. Hearing this, Tetzolo was dumbfounded. He had never been out of the Shampoo Islands from his birth to now. Although he often heard and saw pirates, he really didn't have much interaction with them, so he only served here when he was working. The pirate customers in the store have naturally never experienced the terror of pirates. However, he is not a fool, and he also knows what will happen if he encounters pirates at sea. What should I do? It doesn't matter, then don't go back. I am willing to live here with you forever. Stella smoothed Tetzolo's frown with her long and white fingers. I'm sorry. Tetzolo looked at the beauty in front of him reluctantly. Okay, now that the decision has been made, you can leave. The government official waved his hand for them to leave, and he still had to take notes for the people behind him. According to records, they will divide those who decide to return to their hometown into several teams according to the sea area, and then send them to a warship designated by the Navy to stay temporarily for a few days, and then set off together when the time comes. Thank you for your hard work, and this kind Mr. Navy, thank you for the reminder. Seeing Stella's beautiful smile, the government personnel and the Navy captain immediately felt a lot more happy. It was really pleasing to the eye, and the voice was also very nice. This made the way they looked at Tetzolo complicated. Why was this kid so lucky? He looked poor and weak, but he looked pretty good. Just the eyes of envy and jealousy could not stop Tetzolo from holding Stella's hand and leaving slowly. I'll take you home first, Stella. Okay, is there anyone else at home? No, that annoying mother died of alcoholism 2 years ago, so the house became mine, and it will be our home from now on. Stella nodded as she walked. She had heard Tetzolo talk about her mother who hated Tetzolo's singing. It was clear that Tetzolo sang very well, but just when the reborn couple came to the bridge connecting GR-27 and GR-26, 3 more men in black suits and ties came over. Who are you? Tetzolo quickly stood in front of Stella and asked cautiously. Excuse me, are you Mr. Gilder Tetzolo? The man in black standing at position C asked with a smile. Tetzolo hesitated for a moment and replied, It's me, what's the matter? Let me introduce myself. I am the senior director of the propaganda department of the department directly under the Zuanzhenjuan. My name is Beard. Please give me your advice in the future. Hello, Senior Director Beard, do you have any business with me? Tetsolo asked with a puzzled look on his face. Senior Director Beard looked at him gently and smiled. That's right, our publicity department is a newly established department. We plan to launch several artists and cultivate them into stars, among which singers are the top priority. After careful consideration and investigation, we have selected you as one of the candidates. What? Tetsolo's eyes widened in shock, and he stared from ear to ear at the middle-aged man in front of him who seemed to be a big shot. Stella behind him covered her mouth with both hands. Wait, there are many problems here, let me think about it first. Tetsolo immediately came back to his senses, suppressed the excitement in his heart, forced himself to calm down, gritted his teeth and asked, first of all, how can I confirm whether your identity is true, and how will you pay attention to me, an unknown passerby? As for your identity, we can take you to the Navy branch for confirmation. As for why you were selected. To be honest, Senior Director Beard had no idea. He was also full of confusion and question marks. He only sent his name and general appearance, and then ordered them to find this person and select him as a key training target. As for the reason, no. The big problem is that there is no reason. It means that it involves secrets, something that even he, a senior director, cannot know, so it needs to be taken seriously. This is political wisdom. It's a talent scout. Our talent scout saw you by chance on the roadside and thought you have a very good image. What do you think? Do you want to try to become a singer? Tetsolo and Stella looked at each other, the latter nodded to support him in giving it a try, and the former hesitated for a few seconds before saying. Go to the Navy branch first. If you can find a general wearing a coat to certify it, I will believe you. Anyway, he now has a high degree of favor and trust in the Navy who saved Stella. By the way, do you have any songs you have composed yourself? If not, we can arrange for someone to compose them for you. Yes. From this moment on, the fate of 2 more people changed. Chapter 87 Crocodile was arrested. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Although due to Dorag's action, the 3 areas where slaves were most concentrated, GR27, GR28, and GR29, were quickly solved. However, the lawless zone includes Area 0, Area 10 and Area 20, a total of 29 areas, in which there are said to be thousands or even hundreds of criminals. This also led to chaos and gunfire that lasted for a full day and night before they gradually became calmer. When the sun rose again from the eastern horizon the next day, the naval branch's thorough investigation was basically completed. During the process, due to the large number of pirates and kidnapping gangs detained, Dorag had to request the support of a prison ship from Judiciary Island. While continuing the search, a group of people were sent over. Even so, the cells in the base are now full of people, waiting for the next round of prison ships to arrive. At the same time, the news that the Navy was cleaning up all the slave trading industries in the Chambord Islands also spread to all directions through various channels, which immediately angered many big figures behind the scenes. Although the previous capture of the slave king also aroused the vigilance of these people, it was not their industry after all. After all, the whip did not hit the body and they could not feel the pain. In addition, the Champagne Islands have always been under the Holy Land of Mariajoya and next to the Navy's headquarters, Marineland. There have been no problems for hundreds of years, which makes them feel that the Navy does not dare to move here. As for the reason, most people think that it is because the world's nobles, the celestial dragons, often visit the island, but now his money-printing machine has been taken over by Dorag. Oh no, I should say that he overturned, smashed, and split all the tables below. He even crushed the money-printing machine itself with his foot. As the saying goes, destroying a person's wealth is like killing his parents, and destroying a person's job will result in deep hatred for 10 generations. Now all the big guys related to the slave trade can't sit still, even the undercurrent of the entire dark world is rushing towards Monkey D. Dorag. At the same time, more intelligence personnel began to probe inside the Navy headquarters. They wanted to know whether this was Dorag's unauthorized action or a high-level order from the Navy headquarters, and those royal families also used the power of the nobles to collect information about Holy Land Marie Joa. They needed to know the attitude of the celestial dragons towards this incident. There are also some grumpy big shots who don't care about anything. They are so anxious that they directly send their masters to the Chambord Islands with red eyes. In their view, no matter who gave the order, you, Dolag, are the executor anyway, so they will kill you first. What? Are you the son of naval hero Garp? So what? But Dolag, who was in the midst of such a huge storm, was sitting at his desk in the base, calmly processing documents and reports. He wanted to make a detailed report on this operation. As for the storm, it's not that he didn't realize this, but he just wanted to say one thing: he is the storm. Holy Land, Marie Joya, Pongal Castle resounded with loud blows one after another. Boom. The bright yellow beam bounced on the sea blue court, instantly passing over the oncoming vermilion racket, and flew out of the court with turbulent air waves. The strong wind blew up Guillaume's bangs on her forehead, and the sweat had already wet her black hair into strands. The sweat beads fell from her face and flowed into her mouth. She thought the taste was bitter, but she couldn't taste it. Arrive. 040, Joe Raquel Saint scores. Stuzy, who acted as the referee, stood on the sidelines and looked helplessly at the rear admiral, and said to himself, why bother? Isn't this asking for trouble? Guillaume in the field didn't know what she was thinking, and even if he knew, he didn't care. She should be feeling sore all over now, her legs and feet were shaking, and she might even have some cramps, but this was just an imagination. In fact, she couldn't feel anything. She was half kneeling on the ground holding the handle of the racket in one hand, staring blankly at the sweat falling from the tip of her nose to the ground. The mouth of her hand was numb and her wrist was red, but there is nothing in the world of Guillaume. All he could see with his eyes was darkness. He could not hear any sound with his ears, and he could not even feel the touch of the racket in his hands. Only the hockey of seeing and hearing was still at work. It tells him that the racket is still in his hand, what position he is in now, and that Joe Lackey in the other half is hitting the tennis ball, preparing for the last serve of the game. Like a silent and colorless radar, Guillaume slowly stood up and prepared to catch the ball. Suddenly, Guillaume was shocked to find that she had lost her perception of hockey. She just felt an invisible wave sweeping past for a moment, and then the screen went black. Darkness, everything turns into darkness, no vision, hearing, taste, touch, or feeling, and in the outside world, boom. Another explosive sound of hitting the ball echoed through the entire social square, and then the tennis ball hit by the racket turned into a golden stream of light, quickly exploding at the feet of Guillaume, setting off waves of air visible to the naked eye. Game, scores 6 o'clock, Joe Lackey Saint wins. That while Stussy shouted out the result, she looked strangely at Guillaume, who was standing motionless with eyes blank, wondering, was this girl beaten silly or was she tired? It seems to be working well. But who was standing on the other side of the field that represented the second half of the grand route, turned up the corners of his mouth and revealed a strange smile. Of course he knew what was going on in Guillaume, and this was what he had done, by giving the opponent an unparalleled sense of oppression. Combined with precise mental control, the opponent is deprived of his 5 senses during the game, causing his spirit to collapse and making him unable to continue the game. Yes, he tried to imitate Seiichi Yukimura's trick of 5 senses deprivation in The Prince of Tennis, but he just added a 6th sense. The essence of hockey is the use of mental power, and the core is to control people's 6th sense, so just use stronger mental power to suppress Guillaume. It's interesting to say that Guillaume actually asked him to increase his strength and speed, saying that he wanted to challenge his own limits. Of course, he was willing to satisfy this, but as a price, you should be a guinea pig for the development of your own skills, right? What is this called? Oh, by the way, equal exchange. Stussy quickly noticed something was wrong and quickly came to Guillaume and patted him, only to find that the latter seemed to be really stupid and didn't react at all. Sir, what's wrong with her? It's nothing. Just help her lie down on a chair for a while. She'll wake up in about an hour. Don't forget to feed her some salt water. Dadim said casually, walked to the shelf nonchalantly, put the racket back, and then washed his hands in the basin brought by the maid. Just when he was thinking about what other football skills he could simulate, another maid came over with a phone bug, but she didn't say anything. Glanced at the phone bug, and while lying on his own beach chair and basking in the warm sunshine, he squinted his eyes and asked, "Tell me. Sir, CP0 has taken Crocodile into the infinite hell of Down City. Then let's lock it up first." "Yes." The phone bug closed his eyes and lowered his head. The maid stepped back respectfully and left. While was thinking about the sand crocodile. This guy is 22 years old, because he had just traveled through time 2 years ago and did not propose the plan to become a Shichibukai at that time. Crocodile was not invited to become a Shichibukai after he failed to challenge Whitebeard at the age of 20, as in the original work, of course, there is now. But this Shichibukai is not the other Shichibukai. In short, after being defeated by Whitebeard, this guy returned to paradise in despair, and was arrested because of one of his orders. The problem now is how to use this sand crocodile. He doesn't have the bond that can be used as a hostage like Moria, so he needs to put more thought into it. Chapter 88 What Happened to Crocodile? You are listening at MaleProtagonist. The largest prison in the world, Impelton. No, do not want, pop. In the baptistry room on the first floor of the sea, naked men and women lined up in a long line with faces full of fear and despair. Every time they heard the sound of water falling in front of them and the screams, their bodies would tremble involuntarily. Around them, a prison guard armed with a whip or a gun stared at their every move expressionlessly. The ruthlessness in his eyes was incompatible with the steamy and stuffy space. I saw a few prisoners at the front of the team, shivering and unwilling to take another step forward, because there was no road less than 1 meter away. Below the end is a black iron pot that can accommodate dozens of people. It is filled with boiling hot water, as well as the red shrimps that are desperately wailing, twisting and struggling. Get down quickly. At this time, the 5 meter tall strong prison guard standing by came over impatiently, kicked the trembling prisoners down with a bang, and then grabbed the next female prisoner's neck with his big hands. Completely ignoring her graceful figure and frantic begging for mercy, he threw her into the boiling water. Below, at the other end of the huge iron pot, several prison guards were holding what looked like fishing net bags. They took turns picking up the steaming red shrimp that had been cooked alive and passed out in the pot, and tossed them to the pot not far away. On the ground, there, someone put clean zebra prison uniforms on them, and then handed them over to another group of prison guards to drag them to their respective floors and cells. This was a complete baptism process. What is surprising is that after 5 minutes of disinfection in boiling water at 100 degrees Celsius, none of the prisoners was scalded to death. The most serious ones will fall into coma, and you can still see some guys with strong auras. Although they keep screaming, they can walk up step by step with their trembling and steaming bodies. However, as these guys walked, they looked back at a figure in the pot, as did the many prison guards around them. A pair of eyes full of surprise and even admiration focused on the man sitting cross-legged in the boiling water with his eyes closed and meditating. Not only did he not make any sound, but his face was also very calm, as if he had come here to soak in a hot spring with a comfortable temperature. TSK, awesome, why have so many strongmen come in recently? Is this the first prisoner who doesn't take baptism seriously? Let me think about it. Since last year, except for the pirate King Roger who received special treatment and was not baptized and changed into prison uniforms, that is, the Golden Lion, Shurji, the descendant of the devil, Barrett, and, Harem, Moria and Taklama are now our colleagues. The prison guards were chatting and laughing among themselves, not taking seriously the screaming prisoners who kept falling into the boiling water like dumplings. What about this guy? Who is he? I heard that he is the sand crocodile with a bounty of 320 million belly. He is a natural person with the sand fruit ability. I heard that he failed to challenge the Whitebeard 2 years ago. I don't think so. Do you know how he was caught? By the way, how long does this one have left? 2 minutes and 20 seconds. At the same time, Crocodile, who was in the boiling water, felt that things were unpredictable and everything happened too fast. To be honest, he still hadn't reacted yet. After becoming another silver medal player in the New World 2 years ago, he withdrew from that sea area with an injury, and then wandered aimlessly on the major routes of the paradise. When he's hungry, he eats the overlord's meal, and when anyone challenges him, he kills them easily. He really does whatever he wants, and no one can stop him. He doesn't even need to use his domineering energy. His ability alone is enough to kill these miscellaneous fish in an instant, but he was still suffering inside, because he began to doubt his own ability, and suspected that he might not be the strongest in this life, because the crushing feeling displayed by Whitebeard was too strong, and he gradually believed that relying on his own strength was hopeless, until one day a month ago, he accidentally heard the legend of the ancient weapon, Hades, from an old liar selling fake antiques in a certain kingdom. The power that was said to be able to wipe out an entire island with one shot immediately made Crocodile think that if he could find it, he might be able to defeat Whitebeard, and military power. Back then, the admiral of the flying pirates, the Golden Lion, Shirji relied on his huge fleet and men to surround One Piece Roger. If it hadn't been for the big storm that shocked the world, Roger might have been killed. The gang had been killed long ago. What if I used the Pluto as my main ship and an army of millions to form an unprecedented fleet that far exceeds the size of the Sky Pirates? Such a desirable imagination suddenly ignited his ambition again. Next, because he had found his target again, he began to recruit subordinates who were barely interested in him and thought he could be of some use, while searching for information about ancient weapons. Finally, there is clearer information pointing directly to the kingdom of Alabasta. He also learned about the past history of this kingdom. When he learned that the royal family of this country was one of the 20 royal families that created the world government 800 years ago, he suddenly felt that everything he wanted could be obtained from it. Get it, 7 days ago, Crocodile led a group of men who could barely be regarded as big fish among the fish, and rowed a plain white sailboat to the seaport city of Rape Flower in this desert kingdom. After several hours of learning, he bought a map of the kingdom, enough fresh water, food, and a dozen camels, because he decided to cross the Sea of Sand to the capital city of Arapana. I kind of like this country, it's really nice. Crocodile was riding on a camel, with the rape flowers that had just stepped out behind him, and in front of him was the endless golden desert, and above his head was a scorching sun emitting endless light and heat, but he just felt comfortable. My mood became much happier. Behind him, the subordinates who looked like crooked melons and jujubes heard the boss's words and felt the unbearable heat on their bodies. The corners of their mouths twitched and they secretly complained in their hearts, saying, "Don't you like it? The sand people come to the desert. It's so unbearable. It's the devil who went to hell and went home, isn't he?" But when they got farther and farther away from the rapeseed flowers and continued to step deeper into the desert, they saw a white shadow appearing in front of them as soon as they climbed over a sandy slope. What is that? It seems like a white dot, motionless. Is there anything white in the desert? It's a human being. As Crocodile and his group continued to approach, someone finally saw Bain clearly. It was a man nearly 2 meters tall, wearing a white suit, white gloves, a white hat, and a white mask that completely covered his face. Man, although they couldn't see the other party's face, judging from the direction they were facing, it was obvious that they were waiting for them. This aroused everyone's vigilance and caution, and they quickly pulled the camel under them. It looks like it's looking for trouble. What should I do? Chapter 89, This Sand Crocodile is Fake, So Weak. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Needless to say, just kill him. All of the people Crocodile recruited were desperados, and they all showed the most ferocious looks, but they still gave the new boss full respect, but no one dared to act without authorization. "Boss, do you see? It seems that there is another hunter who is eyeing my bounty head. Go and deal with it." Crocodile narrowed his eyes and ordered calmly. "Ha ha ha, got it. Come on, finally have some fun." That I saw that this group of people was completely excited after hearing the order. They all shouted excitedly and urged the camels to rush downwards. Among them, one person seemed to think that the camel was too slow, so he jumped directly from the back of the peak into the air, and then quickly spun a few times. When he landed, he had turned into a tall and strong half-orc with 2 legs. "Here comes Brother Elon's animal-type sheep-goat fruit antelope form," that as soon as the man finished speaking, the half-goat man bent his legs down and dug his hard sheep hooves into the sand. The next moment, as his thick leg muscles exerted force, he leaped high into the air with a loud bang. "I want this life. Watch my demon sheep trample." Elon, whose face was covered with wool, watched cruelly as her hoof quickly stepped on the man in white's head, her pupils filled with scarlet murderous intent. Clang. The huge sheep's hoof, as hard as steel, was wrapped in the rolling air and stepped hard on, a white index finger that was raised up, and there was a deafening impact sound. The turbulent force exploded from the point of contact, squeezing the air around the 2 people into circular ripples like water waves, and the gravel beneath them seemed to be dented by several centimeters under invisible pressure. How is it possible? Ah! An extremely pitiful wailing appeared, and the other people who rushed behind subconsciously grabbed the camel in shock, and stared dumbfoundedly at the blood-stained bone spurs sprouting from the body of Brother Elon, who almost died in the blink of an eye. Demonstrates what is called the limit of cruelty. For a moment, everyone was shocked by such a horrific and bloody scene, but Crocodile's expression remained natural. "Superhuman ability user, puff, puff, puff." But before he could finish speaking, a surprise occurred again. Below, a group of people who had already rushed out dozens of meters away, pale white long swords emerged from the sand, connected to the camel's sword. The stomach and the owner sitting on it were instantly pierced. More than a dozen people and camels fell to the ground and died before they could even scream. A stream of warm blood flowed out from the breach, dyeing the circles of gravel red. A gust of wind blew across the sand sea, passing quickly between the white man and Crocodile. "This guy." At this time, Crocodile looked at the pale swords floating in the sky with blood dripping from time to time, and his expression became solemn. He didn't use his haki to sense the opponent's aura before, because the past 2 years of his trip to paradise had made him no longer cautious, and he was used to being able to easily kill no matter who he was, but just now, his subordinates had reminded him with their own lives. But after feeling the overwhelming and suffocating aura of the man in white, he could no longer remain calm. "Who are you exactly?" Crocodile turned into a ball of gravel and left the hunchback, appearing about 50 meters away from the man in white. At the same time, his muscles were tense, always ready to take action. Whoosh! Aha! 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 But the man in white didn't respond. Instead, 13 pale swords shot out from the air, and their speed was so fast that the sonic boom was far behind. Fortunately, Crocodile's power of knowledge and color was well prepared, and combined with the elementalization ability of the natural system, he was able to easily avoid all attacks. The next second, a blurry white shadow flashed in his sight. Crocodile's expression suddenly changed with shock. His right arm, which had turned into a ball of gravel, vibrated at high speed, making a buzzing sound. Crescent-shaped dunes, the huge crescent-shaped sand blade swept out in front of him and collided with the white sword blade that was coming towards him, but the former didn't even hold on for a second. The sword light was as fast as a white rainbow and cut through the sand blade directly. On the latter's chest, although he hurriedly turned into elements and tried to spread out his body to avoid the sword, he was still a little slower after all. When the earth-yellow wind sand he formed a human form again after a distance of hundreds of meters, there was indeed an appearance on his chest. A long bloody incision was made. What a fast knife! Crocodile covered the wound on his chest and stared at the man in white with an ugly face. Cold sweat was already breaking out on his head. As for calling the sword a knife or something, there was no need to worry, but in response to his words, the man in white stopped as if he was sizing him up, and suddenly spoke. "So weak, how come your domineering power is so weak? This person is the CP0 sent by Wulooxing, and he is not an ordinary CP0 member, but a CP0 with the title of Sacred Shield. To put it simply, the Holy Shield must be CP0, but CP0 is not necessarily the Holy Shield, and the Holy Shield represents its strength." comparable to that of a naval admiral. Originally, to deal with the 22-year-old Crocodile, such a high-level combat force should not be dispatched. Normally, a Kainu, Kizaru, Auji, or a few ordinary CP-0s should be sent to replace the general, but because the shop run by a certain supreme being is too big, everyone in the Navy is very busy, and there is no one left to send. You can't let the Marshal go out for this little sand crocodile, right? The CP-0 side is similar, with basically all the manpower sent out. In addition, considering that Crocodile had tied with Barrett several times 2 years ago, and even challenged Whitebeard, although he may have lost, he must not be much weaker, and he can definitely win. Barrett makes the comparison. Now, although Barrett is only 21 years old, he is no longer something that ordinary vice admirals or CP-9s can deal with. Moreover, Crocodile has arrived in Alabasta, and he cannot dispatch a large number of warships to encircle and suppress him. Therefore, he must find a combat force that can surpass Barrett in terms of strength to capture the former. This was the result of the previous internal discussion in CP-0. Therefore, it was decided that he, one of the two Holy Shields, would take action. The problem is, after the initial battle just now, Crocodile's armed hockey is too weak, like a rookie who has just mastered hockey. To be honest, if you are just a natural ability user who has just learned domineering and has not yet awakened, just sending a senior naval vice admiral is enough, but something's wrong. How could Crocodile be so weak? Although this kid is not very old, his extraordinary qualifications can be seen from his height of 2.5 meters. Ordinary people cannot be regarded as the standard. His 4 or 5 years are enough to be worth the 10 or so years of most people. The eyes of the man in white were full of doubts under the mask. He looked at the guy in front of him and wondered if he had encountered a fake sand crocodile. Crocodile was extremely angry when he heard that this guy looked down on him so much, but he was not the kind of person who gets easily upset, and he actually realized that his domineering power had weakened, which made him even more frightened and angry. Why, what happened to my domineering power? What happened to my domineering attitude? This question was exactly what Crocodile was thinking hard about while sitting in the boiling water, and he was struggling with it all the way after his defeat. The current self is basically the same as 2 years ago. At that time, he had just gone to sea. He really didn't do much exercise in the past 2 years. It's not surprising that his strength has not improved, but it can't decline, and it has dropped so drastically. It's time, Crocodile, come out and get dressed. At this time, the prison guard outside the pot shouted to him nervously. He didn't know why he was nervous. It was obvious that the other party had stone handcuffs on his hands and feet, his shadow had been cut away, and he still had a pet collar around his neck. He couldn't resist no matter what. Chapter 90 Crocodile and Barrett. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Let me out. Let me see the strongest power in the world. Did you hear that? Let me out quickly. On the 6th floor underground, in the dark corridor known as Infinite Hell, roars full of anxiety, anger, and unwillingness were heard, accompanied by purple-black air waves, sweeping across the entire place unbridled. As soon as Crocodile stepped out of the large elevator, he heard the familiar voice, but for a moment he couldn't remember whose voice it was. The waves of air hit his face, making him frown in displeasure. It's that bastard Barrett again. I don't know why he's been crazy lately. He suddenly started shouting and showing off his domineering aura. Deputy Director Magellan, who was standing behind him, complained dissatisfiedly, because this guy made it impossible for the prison guards to get down here, otherwise they would pass out as soon as they stepped in. Barrett, that when Crocodile heard this name, he immediately remembered the past and sneered, it's really Douglas Barrett. I didn't expect that we would meet again in a place like this. Let's go. Your cell happens to be right next to him. This is what I specially arranged. You can help us persuade this bastard to shut up and calm down. At Magellan's urging, the two walked along the stone corridor one after another between the huge independent cells. The railings of these cells were all made of extremely hard sea stone. Boom, suddenly, while Barrett was still making a fuss and venting his purple-black overlord-colored domineering energy, another dark gold overlord-colored domineering energy burst out from another cell, and it was stronger than the former one. The air waves are stronger. If the former is like the waves on the sea, then the latter is like a tsunami more than 10 meters high. The purple-black color was suddenly submerged by the dark gold color. The pressure was so strong that not only the two people in the corridor broke out in cold sweat. Even the monsters in each cell were shocked. "Shut up. You little brat from Roger's regiment. Who is this person?" Crocodile, who subconsciously stopped, swallowed and asked in a low voice. Magellan answered in a low voice. Golden Lion, Shiki. Hearing this name, Crocodile suddenly realized and said to himself, "It turns out to be this big boss." "Move," Magellan urged. He didn't want to stay here, so he continued to escort the former in the direction of Barrett. "Ha ha ha ha, who did you think it was?" It turned out to be the captain's defeated general. At this time, Barrett's extremely arrogant cry rang out. "Old guy, at your age, you'll be useless if you stay here for a few years." Shurji yelled back angrily and said, "Kid, I was defeated by the storm back then, not Roger. If it hadn't been for that sudden storm, your Roger group would have been killed by me. Humph, if you lose, you lose. There's no point in making excuses. You are a big shot outside, even though you are just a big shot that will be surpassed by me sooner or later." Barrett lay on the cold floor and curled his lips in disdain, but his mood at this time was still extremely bad, which was why he was so irritable. Ever since he talked to that person, he felt like he was losing his potential and qualifications every minute and every second here. He couldn't wait to go out and continue to get stronger, then surpass Garp, defeat Garp, and prove that he was better than Garp. Roger is stronger, he also wants to meet the so-called true strongest person in the world, and then surpass and defeat him. Rely on your own strength to surpass everything and obtain everything. On the other side, Shurji heard the kid's sarcasm, a sneer appeared on his face, and replied, "Beyond? You brat who doesn't know the heights of heaven and earth. If I kill you outside, you can't get out even if you get to this place. Now, don't even think about surpassing me and Roger in this life." Barrett didn't think much of the first half of the sentence, but the last sentence broke his guard a little. His expression suddenly became ferocious, and his breathing became heavy, but he didn't reply back, but thought about the words of the mysterious man. That man said that he would let him go out in a year or two to meet the real strongest man. To be honest, based on this alone, he actually had hope, but he didn't want to tell anyone about it for fear of something unexpected happening. But this year and 2 years have been too difficult, so he yelled so manically, hoping to attract the attention of the mysterious man and take him out in advance. There was no sound from Barrett's side, and Shurji stopped paying attention to him. This actually allowed the infinite hell to return to a state of silence. This also made the sounds outside the corridor noticeable. "Go in." Magellan's voice is familiar to most people here. As soon as he heard this, he knew that there must be another little friend, but he didn't know where he came from. This place is not accessible to ordinary people. In fact, with Crocodile's current strength and identity, strictly speaking, he is not qualified to come here. Instead, he should be imprisoned in the extreme cold hell upstairs, where criminals with a bounty of over 100 million are concentrated. But who knows that he was personally captured by the Holy Shield in CP0, and specifically requested to be locked up in the infinite hell, so Director Columbus could only act according to the instructions. Of course, what he listened to was not the order of the Holy Shield, but the order from the world government behind the other party. After all, the two sides did not belong to the same system, and no one could order the other. Crocodile obediently walked into his cell. He ignored Magellan, who was closing the door behind him, and looked around the environment. He found that there was nothing to see, except for a stone platform where you could sit and lie down, and there was a stone platform next to it. Quality toilet, nothing else. But he didn't care. He sat casually on the stone platform. He could already imagine how boring his life here was. Fortunately, there was an old acquaintance next to him. Ha 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 ha. Crocodile's laughter was particularly interesting. Although every pronunciation was ha ha, the tone seemed to be lengthened on purpose. It sounded like he was afraid that he would be out of breath. As soon as Barrett in the next cell heard this voice, an unpleasant face suddenly appeared in his mind. a bastard playing with sand who he couldn't win 2 years ago, but he couldn't lose either. This was his unsolved mystery at the time. It was clear that he had a 50-50 draw against Vice-Captain Rayleigh, but when he met the guy playing in the sand, it was also a 50-50 draw. This is wrong. He, Barrett, is the strongest genius in the world. It is only natural that he can do this, but why can a guy who just went to sea seem to be 50-50 equal to Pluto Rayleigh? So is my strength on par with Rayleigh or with that bastard? Stupid Crocodile, I didn't expect you to be caught too, but why is the aura on your body so weak? Well, Crocodile's long smile was immediately suppressed by Barrett's words, his face turned red, and he gritted his teeth and said, "You and I are equal, so even if I am weak, that means you have become weaker too." Huh? Barrett was confused. What kind of logic was this? But it sounded like there was nothing wrong with it, and he said angrily, "Although I don't know what happened to you, but with your current aura, I will beat you to death in less than a day." "Humph, then come out. Anyway, the results between you and me so far are tied. You have no right to say that I am weak." Crocodile disdainfully tried to save himself. Barrett gritted his teeth angrily.